Thank you to Kenzie Bruce for his incredibly generous support on Patreon. Playing Jadar again up against Azusa Lost but Seeking. We have a Sol Ring in hand, we'll have to hope that our opponent doesn't have one. So we'll risk getting down our turn 1 Sol Ring just in case we get into a 4-drop we'd like to play next turn. But it's likely just our commander, I would have thought. We'll get that down whether they blow up the Sol Ring or not. Looks like we get to keep the Sol Ring, so there we see a Viscerous Seer, which we can get down this turn thanks to the mana from the Sol Ring, so play our Jadar and the Viscerous Seer. Jadar makes a Decayed Zombie token for us at the beginning of the end step. And there we see Kalni Heart Expedition, so a pretty slow Azusa so far. It's going to be a turn 3 Azusa is pretty slow by most Azusa standards. And then we see a go for the throat. Usually once Azusa hits play the damage is already done because you can't respond to land drops, but you can respond to landfall triggers, so Kalni Heart Expedition actually going to hurt them potentially. We'll go through to attacks here. And then with the Decayed trigger on the stack we will sacrifice the zombie, it's already dealt damage. Might as well get a scry out of it. And there is a Bitter Blossom. It is pretty slow, I'd rather get into some card draw to be honest. Drop ourselves the Urborg and yeah, I think we're just holding up Murderous Rider and go for the throat here. We could go Grey Merchant of Asphodel, sacrifice it to the Viscerous Seer and then animate Dead onto it at some point. Our opponent plays a land into the Kalni Heart Expedition, so they are going to be able to play Azusa and then drop a land straight away here. So there we see a High Market. Let's go for the throat on that right now. They might as well sacrifice it in response to gain a life here, which is exactly what he does. So did get one additional land drop out with the High Market, but we did hold them off on some lands apparently. I think they need 3 on this, yeah. So could have held them off on the Kalni Heart Expedition as well. And if they don't have a land in hand, well, they were never going to trigger this anyway, but they can't afford to get their commander out at this point. Alright, and getting rid of the Bitter Blossom paid off, a Necropotence for us. So swinging, Decayed goes onto the zombie, which will have it sacrificed at the end of the turn, but once again, once it goes on the stack, we'll go for Viscerous Seer. And a land is fine, not going to make a land this turn unfortunately. Putting 6 life into the Necropotence, making another Decayed Zombie, and then we get all of our cards that we just got with the Necropotence. They go into hand, and yep, clearing a bunch of lands off the top unfortunately. So discard a couple of swamps to that. Do manage to get ourselves into a Blood Artist though. And they did have another land, unless they just drew into it. That is a Buried Ruin. So now can sacrifice the Kalni Heart Expedition anytime they like. 4 cards in hand at the moment. And that is an Oracle of Muldiah. They do have a land on top, and play the Forest, revealing a Blast Zone after that. But they've already played 2 lands this turn thankfully. So might not want to shuffle with the Kalni Heart Expedition. They could use the Blast Zone to get rid of our sack outletting Viscerous Seer and the Sol Ring. Alright, so we don't draw a card of course during our draw step thanks to the Necropotence. So I think we're fine to get down the Blood Artist. And then Oracle of Muldiah is card advantage for them in an Azusa deck because they're very likely to reveal lands off the top. So with that in mind, why don't we go for Swift End onto the Oracle. That will clear the way so that we can swing through to them as well. They could counter the Swift End here by sacrificing with the High Market so that we don't get the Murderous Rider. And they decide to do exactly that. That does trigger the Blood Artist though, so we'll save the targets on that and always yield. So Blood Artist always going to be pointed at our opponent of course. Well, they do gain a life from High Market to negate that. Swift End is effectively countered, so the Murderous Rider goes into the bin. And yeah, might as well get down the Phyrexian Tower here I think. So we'll turn everything in sideways and do the old Viscerous Seer trick again. And our opponent started holding priority all of a sudden, so not sure if he's got a fog effect or something like that. Scrying a land onto the bottom. Drew plenty of those from the Necropotence last time. Then deciding to shuffle the Blast Zone away, so Kalni Heart Expedition being cracked. We're not going to do anything else this turn, so let's go for another 6 into Necropotence is fine. Yeah, and our opponent went on a real go slow for a minute there. I was assuming that he didn't have anything else in hand. 3 cards I think he had have been kicked out into the lobby now, so I can't see. but instead of scooping, just decided to leave me waiting for a long time for some reason. Anyway, scoop now, so we'll try again. Up against a DC Brood Tyrant this time, and a much heavier hand, but we've got card draw with Village Rites, so I will try that one. We're on the draw as well. Just a tap land from our opponent. We'll hold on to the fetch for as long as possible, because the shuffle might be relevant with this thing. Satyr Wayfinder for our opponent, going to start dumping cards in the graveyard. Reveal with that a Buried Alive, which went into the bin, as did Sol Ring, and they put the Woodland Chasm into the bin as well, so can expect Woodland Cemetery to come down next turn. We draw into Urborg, which I dare say will help my opponent, so just get down a basic into Jadar. And now we see Wood Elves from our opponent. Oubliette will be really good on the commander. We'll swing in here, and yeah, we're going to have to discard something to hand size if we go Village Rites at the end of combat here, so we'll see if we want to do that or not. They just decide to chump, that's fine. So yeah, we'll go Village Rites now. Got rid of one of their creatures and get to draw 2 cards. And we draw into a Defile, which is really good against the commander, so we can just hold that up here. So we'll discard a basic to hand size. So DC Brood Tyrant entering play. They could have Swan Song or an Offer You Can't Refuse held up, something like that. So we'll go for the Defile now before they mill the cards so that they don't get a zombie. We managed to get rid of the Sidisi. If they play a land next turn, they can just play out the Sidisi again. And they would have milled a creature, that is Birds of Paradise. Dakmor's Salvage, they can obviously dredge out, and then they've got Life and Death as well. And we see a Pitiless Plunderer, so let's go for the Prismatic Vista, just holding off on the Urborg as long as possible. They do have 2 black mana, so I dare say they've got pretty much all the black mana they could want. But we'll play out the Pitiless Plunderer here. I expect that we'll be seeing Sidisi again, ready for an Oubliette next turn. Swing in with the Zombie token. If they decide to block with the Satyr Wayfinder here, it could switch on the Dictate of Erebos for us. And they do decide to block with Satyr Wayfinder. Having to sacrifice 2 Decayed makes us a treasure token with the Pitiless Plunderer, so that's going to be some nice ramp for us. Nothing for us to do during our opponent's turn here. Alright, they were just setting up a Living Death, so Pitiless Plunderer going to trigger a couple more times. Our commander is in the bin. We could reanimate it with the Agadeem's Awakening, which we are going to be able to afford here, so yeah, we'll leave it in the bin. Noteworthy that Sidisi never went into the graveyard. Muldrifter has hit the bin at some point as well, along with a Tech Edge. So anyway, they land the Living Death, so getting into play the Birds of Paradise, along with the 2 creatures that they blocked with previously. And then they made a couple of zombies there. Was that on 1 trigger from the Sidisi? Sidisi was broken at some point and I thought it was fixed. You should only ever get 1 zombie per trigger with this. We've seen some self-mill, that is Glenelender Archmage. A Wonders hit the bin, so all of their stuff has flying. A Mana Vault, Swan Song as well. So we're really in need of a board wipe here, drawing into another swamp. Yeah, I think Oubliette might be fine at this point. So we'll get rid of the Oubliette, and then if we do manage to draw into a board wipe, then we can do the board wipe and not give them back their commander. Be nice to put 4 mana into X on this, but worst case scenario, we can always just put 2 mana into it to grab our commander back. Don't think we're going to be casting the Hagra Mauling or the Dictate of Erebos, but we've got that option available to us. A Gaia Reach Sanitarium. And they start swinging in at us with all their creatures. We're at 39, so not too worried about that yet. They do have a full grip available though. And there is a Frantic Search, loot 2 and untap your 3 lands. So dumping, they've got Protean Hulk combo in here. Dakmor's Salvage being discarded as well. Playing a Stitcher's Supplier, so that is more mill. Rapid Hybridization and a couple of lands. Okay, there's a Fellstinger for us. Our opponent could counter this. Agadeem's Awakening is the problem. I don't think fixing their black mana matters at this point, so let's try the Agadeem's Awakening. They are holding up priority, so this could be a blowout for us. They're looking pretty good against us anyway, apart from the fact that we managed to get rid of the commander for now. Then they tap down 4 Simic mana, deciding to tap it in a different way. Yep, they have Venser, Shaper, Savant. So we don't lose the Agadeem's Awakening at least. Yeah, and it is the Agadeem's Awakening that they are bouncing, so deciding to leave the oubliette in place. And then Gaia Reach Sanitarium again, each player draws and discards. And there's a mana crypt for us. Yeah, I think Hagra Mauling is going to have to go down here. Although argument to be made for Dictate of Erebos, because we don't have a lot of creatures in play and we don't have a sack outlet either, so maybe should have gone for that. Swinging at us with everything again. 4 cards in hand. So it's safe to say that they don't have any artifact and enchantment removal. There's a swamp for us to make this turn. So we'll attempt the Agadeem's Awakening again and hope that they don't have a counterspell. So that comes into play. Let's go for the Mana Crypt. And I think we wait on the Fellstinger until we've got a Decayed Zombie in play. And we can better make use of the Dictate of Erebos that way. As well as the Fellstinger being allowed to stay in play with its Death Touch. Gaia Reach Sanitarium being activated again. And we see another swamp. We'll just discard the swamp. The Datmor Salvage is in the bin. Doom Whisperer. Makokoro. Plaguecrafter. They have an Animate Dead as well. And then, do they have Cyclonic Rift or something here? No, it is a Fact or Fiction. So let's see here. Yeah, we don't have a creature for the Exhume, unfortunately. And they can just grab Protean Hulk with that, which I dare say is just a straight up combo. So Life from the Loam, Arcane Signet. So I think that's the best we can do here. They can have some mana in Temple of the False God, and Exhume will get the Protean Hulk back, no doubt. Then it's Life from the Loam with some counter magic backup and the Sylvan Library, so it's card advantage versus comboing off, basically. And they decide to get rid of the Exhume, so they take the counter magic backup, which we now need to bear in mind they've got available to them. Don't think I have any infinite combos or anything like that in this deck, because I didn't want to... a lot of the players that I've been playing against recently have been more casual, so I didn't want to do typical Gravecrawler, Phyrexian Arena combo and stuff like that, or Phyrexian Altar. Yeah, so I'm not sure if we can get out from underneath this one. Can't block anything here because everything has flying. So I think we probably go down next turn. Yep, go down to 9. So unless we can wipe the board, which I doubt we can, they do have counter magic held up for the Fellstinger and the Dictate of Erebos, of course. Life from the Loam grabs back the Tech Edge, the Barren Moor, and the Temple of the False God. And then we'll likely lose life to the Mana Crypt as well. Nope, we win the flip, so stay at 9. Okay, there's a Braids, a little bit too late, I think. Yeah, I think we just go for swinging in here. They cycle the Barren Moor in response, so taking themselves up to 7. I don't think they've often had below 7 cards in this game. And decide not to block, so just hitting them for 2. I was hoping to get rid of the Birds of Paradise as a little act of resistance towards the end here. Let's go Dictate of Erebos. That gets sacrificed, and it triggers the Dictate of Erebos and the Pitiless Plunderer. We will attempt to Braids. No need for our opponent to counter a Braids because they don't know what we've got in hand. Yeah, pretty risky. Braids doesn't do anything to them here, so they don't know what we've got in hand. They shouldn't counter the Braids. Might have another counter spell in hand though. So we do get to draw a card with the Fellstinger. Not that we can do anything else at this point. So that sacrifices itself, makes us a treasure, triggers Dictate of Erebos again, and we will draw 2 and lose 2. And yeah, we're getting into anything. That's Dreadhorde Invasion and Solemn Simulacrum. Our opponent sacrifices the Stitcher's Supplier to our Dictate. So just a case of waiting for them to turn in sideways at us now. Drew a card from the Gaia Reach Sanitarium and 2 from the Arcane Denial, and there is the damnation that we've needed for the past few turns. Yeah, the early Living Death doing a hell of a lot of damage here. And couldn't get into the board wipe or the tutor to deal with it, unfortunately, so all our opponent has to do here is turn in, and that's us done. Obviously something like a Bajuka Bog would have helped us as well. And there we are, go down to -2. Good game to my opponent, hopefully you all enjoyed it. I think I will try one more. Jadar versus Rayav this time. Plenty of mana there potentially, as well as card draw, so we'll keep. Get down the turn 1 Sol Ring again, so we can once again go for Viscera Seer into the Jadar. Then seeing a gamble on turn 1 from Rayav, 6 cards in hand. and discarding a Great Axe to that, so I dare say that they got whatever they tutored for. And there we are, a mana crypt. Crypt straight into Dousing Dagger, and we draw into another swamp, which I'm not against, so it can be the Viscera Seer first of all, and then play the Jadar again. And these plant tokens with a sack outlet are going to be useful with the Dark Prophecy next turn. So we'll just have to hope that there's no kind of board wipe from our opponent. Well, a lot of mana from our opponent, but they're down to 2 cards. That is a Mox Diamond and a land this time. Rayav into play with the Dousing Dagger equipped. And play a land this turn. We got into Village Rites. I suppose, much as I'd like to get down the Dark Prophecy here, the Dictate of Erebos is the thing to go for, isn't it? So we'll just hold on to the zombie token, not swing anything in here. That's quite a stacked hand from our opponent. A Swords to Plowshares. They go down to 1 in hand. Well, we'll do the Dictate of Erebos now then, and have the Viscera Seer sacrifice itself, because we don't want to see it exiled here, and we do have some reanimation in the deck. So that triggers the Dictate of Erebos, of course, making use of the flash, getting that into play. They'll have to sacrifice their commander, which they can get out again next turn, but instead just deciding to scoop. Alright, one more. Jadar versus Cormella now. We have a tutor for anything we need. Decent curve, removal, a sack outlet. Can't find much of a reason to ship that back. Seeing a tap land in Port of Carfell here, and we draw into a Grave Titan, so it's just a turn 1 Champion of the Perished. Our opponent foretelling a card, and we draw into a Cult Conscript, so I think it's our commander here. Might as well swing in for 1 point of damage at our opponent. Draw into Feed the Swarm this time, after our opponent just drops a tap land. I think we want to make sure that we've got enough black mana, so let's Demonic Tutor for an Urborg and hope that our opponent doesn't counter this. They do not, so where are we? Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth into our hand, and then we play that and we can get down the Cult Conscript here. And now we're definitely ready for seeing Yawgmoth Renphysician for some card draw next turn. As long as our opponent doesn't wipe the board, that is. Not sure if my opponent's going to get down a flash creature here, so I don't want to risk getting rid of the Jadar. We'll just swing in with the 2/2 zombies. It is a Behold the Multiverse that they foretold before, so scry 2, draw 2. Cornelia Glamour Thief into play. I think it's a pretty risky card to leave in play, so... Okay, Chrome Mox could be good. I'm just wondering if we want to use some spot removal here. Play out the High Market. Yeah, I think we're best just going for the Infernal Grasp here onto our opponent's commander. And then they can return the Behold the Multiverse from graveyard to hand if they want to, thanks to the death trigger. Just obviously worried about them being able to ramp so much with this thing. 6 cards in hand over there. Swing in with everything. Get our opponent down to 25, and yeah, nothing else that we're going to do here, I don't think. Gonna hold off on the Chrome Mox, because there's nothing from hand that I want to exile here, really. Rakdos Signet, so they'll definitely be able to get down the commander again next turn. Followed by a Demonic Tutor. Then after that, going down to 5 cards in hand again, so there is an Animate Dead, and they get down their Cormella. So we can go for Feed the Swarm onto the Animate Dead if we want to. Deciding to hold back the Cormella as a blocker. And we get into a swamp again, that's good. So the question is, do we want to put Grave Titan underneath the Chrome Mox? I think I just want to start drawing cards this turn, but I also want to get rid of my opponent's commander, so... yeah. Don't like getting rid of the Grave Titan here, but I think we'll just have to. Feed the Swarm onto Animate Dead, loses us 2 life, but it does get rid of their commander. And they can grab back the Demonic Tutor if they like. Then we play ourselves out a Yawgmoth Renphysician, so we will swing in here. Going to draw a card with the Decayed Zombie. Once it decides to sacrifice itself, we'll deal some damage first. Our opponent is having the game last long enough that we can actually do something here. We've only got him down to 16. So sacrifice the Decayed Zombie to the Yawgmoth, and a Dictate of Erebos is a great draw for us, assuming that our opponent just taps out into the commander again next turn. The Champion of the Perished is now a 5/5, which is noteworthy. Damage obviously mounting up from that thing. So going for the Demonic Tutor again, this could be the board wipe. They've got 4 mana for a Damnation. We can refill our hand before the board wipe resolves at least. And yep, there it is, a 4-mana Blasphemous Act. So now we pay a bunch of life and sacrifice some creatures. Noteworthy that you don't need a legal target for the Yawgmoth, because it is up to one creature is going to get -1/-1. So you can just declare that no creatures are getting -1/-1 and sack the creature anyway to draw a card. So that's what we're doing here. And we've drawn into an Animate Dead, so we can get our Yawgmoth back straight away. Alright, so drawing into a Gravecrawler, some lands, Animate Dead for the Yawgmoth, and we'll go over to our turn. Obviously still have the Dictate of Erebos available to us, and we draw into an Oubliette for the Commander is really good, so drop a land, Animate Dead onto Yawgmoth, we'll bring that back out of the graveyard. Then Jadar into play again, and we'll play out the Gravecrawler as well. And as long as we've got a Decayed Zombie in play, we can sacrifice and replay the Gravecrawler over and over again. I think I mentioned it previously in this video, but we don't have the Phyrexian Altar combo in here because played it a few times and didn't really want it to be that type of deck. But you can always add Phyrexian Altar in here if you want to be able to go infinite with Aristocrat effects and stuff. Ashiok Dream Render now. So we're not going to be able to search our library, and they can exile our graveyard. We'll have to be careful of that with the Gravecrawler and sacrificing things with Yawgmoth. As long as Gravecrawler's in play by the end of a turn, then we should be alright. Don't have too many tutors in this deck either. I don't like ramming a deck full of tutors, to be honest. Okay, so there is a Resculpt. Don't want to see the back of Gravecrawler here. We could get into another sack outlet and still make use of that. We could sacrifice the Decayed Zombie, but we want to be getting rid of Ashiok here, which means we'll want to swing in next turn. So unfortunately not going to make use of any more card draw from the Thran Physician. Although we do get a 4/4 here, don't we? Yeah, so in fact we can pay a life, get rid of a Decayed Zombie, and that draws us into Fellstinger. That's pretty good. Can use that to sacrifice the Gravecrawler next turn, so we'll take our 4/4 now. And then the Ashiok minuses down, and it Dictate the skeleton as well, the Cult Conscript. So we're not going to be able to reanimate that anymore. 5 cards in hand, and we can get rid of the Ashiok here at least. Alright, into Costly Plunder, so yeah, more stuff that we can sacrifice Gravecrawler with. And we go for the attack. The Elemental goes in at Ashiok to finish it off, and the other two can deal damage to our opponent. So now we're fine to go for Fellstinger, I think. Exploit the Gravecrawler, and we will lose 2 and draw 2. Then we can replay the Gravecrawler, thanks to having a zombie in play, because the Fellstinger is a zombie. And I think we're just holding up Costly Plunder at this point. So unfortunately we can't go for the Dictate of Erebos on our opponent's turn. So yeah, just holding up Demolition Field and Costly Plunder is fine, I think. They might get into a Cabal Coffers into our Urborg or something, and we can threaten to hold up some removal on them here. Noteworthy as well that this is in range of reanimating something, so that might be worth a Demolition Field. Now it's Liliana, Death's Majesty, and they do have a Solemn Simulacrum available to them if they want to reanimate something. So that's exactly what they do. We'll try not to get distracted by the Planeswalker if we can push damage through to our opponent. Yeah, we're 1 damage shy of getting our opponent next turn. If we can get the Solemn out of the way, that's annoying. So I think instead we go for Demolition Field brings in a land untapped, unfortunately, which could be relevant. So we'll leave the Demolition Field for now. Yeah, let's just Costly Plunder here onto the Gravecrawler. We can't get our opponent next turn anyway. Draws us into Yahenni and a Sol Ring as well. And then we draw into Ancient Tomb. So we can drop Ancient Tomb into Sol Ring, into the Yahenni, so we've got a sack outlet now. Play the Dictate of Erebos at sorcery speed. Then we can play the Gravecrawler, sacrifice Gravecrawler to Yahenni, and we can play the Gravecrawler as many times as we like, thanks to our Decayed Zombie and the Fellstinger. So our opponent will draw a card here to the Dictate of Erebos and Solemn Simulacrum trigger. Yahenni gains a plus counter, and now we've got exactly enough on our opponent, so we will go through to attacks and swing everything in at our opponent. I will double check because Magic Online can be weird. But yeah, the haste from Yahenni being absolutely relevant here. And there we are, getting our opponent down to 0 exactly, so I think we would have been in trouble there. Seeing our opponent's hand here, yeah, if the game had gone on much longer, I dare say we would have been in trouble. Agent of Erebos, Aminatu's Augury, Behold the Multiverse, Echo of Eons, they had some really good stuff. Living Death would have been a pain for us, although with a sack outlet we could have set ourselves up alright with Living Death. Thassa Deep Dwelling as well, so it's a good game to my opponent. I think, like I said, if the game had gone on much longer we would have been in trouble, but just managed to squeak it through. Please consider leaving a like on the video if you enjoyed it, it helps with YouTube's algorithms. And a massive thank you to the patrons who support financially as well. It's pretty much them single-handedly keeping me around here, so I do thank them for that. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.